is a lot quieter. You do a good job, I really do.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the Stormwater Utility Task Force. I'm Jay Legree, the chairman of the committee, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're a little bit behind times. We're 5 minutes out, but we'll make it up. I don't know how, but we'll make it up. Anyway, the first thing I'm going to do is have a roll call and then talk a tiny bit about parking and then a couple of other things, and then we'll get going. I'd like to roll call first. Bob Suppies.
Here.
Leticia Gomez.
Here.
Suzanne Good.
Here.
Joe Vescio is on vacation. Susan Stewart. Frank Cooper.
Here?
Eric Seward. Are we missing? I think we're missing Eric. Janice Miller.
Here.
Tom Childers, and we're missing Tom. Mary Pack.
Here.
Bruce Williams.
Here.
Jan Conacy can't be here today. She called me and we talked for a while, so she'll be here in spirit. And Elise Burns.
Here.
David Athy, our consultant, is in the hospital. We don't know if it's serious or anything, but we just found this out last night, as did he, and he managed to give us his presentation, and Kevin's going to present that or chair that, and so that's how we're going to proceed today. Parking, I think everybody received did everybody receive my message about parking up against the firehouse if there were any open spots over there, and if there were not any open spots, Evan, the interim city manager, promised that he wouldn't be patrolling this lot this afternoon. And if you get a ticket, bring it in and Evan will get it fixed up. So I think we're okay. But I think Kevin, before we leave today, will give us some passes for the next meeting. So we should be square by then. This is the time of the season that the parking lot is just packed. Was it packed just now?
There were 20 or 30 spots.
Open?
Yep.
Wow. Okay, so everybody got a chance to park their car and they didn't have to walk into the middle of town somewhere. That's great.
Am I the only one who has walked to all the meetings?
No,
I
no,
couldn't
Suzanne.
imagine.
No,
I couldn't imagine parking is as big a deal.
this
as
is a
it
committee of stakeholders
Yeah, yeah. I was
who
gonna say.
live around here. But anyhow, I need to, we do need to make allowances for people who I bring my car in, and people who bring their cars in and park. They shouldn't have to pay for being a member of this committee.
And for rainy days.
There's always umbrellas.
If it rains, I'm not right.
What we're going to do, Kevin have you got his presentation keyed up? Kevin's going to chair the meeting, and I promise you, we'll find topics to discuss as we go along, because you folks are going to have plenty to say. So I'll turn it over to Kevin and go.
Thanks, Commissioner. Linda, can you? Yeah, if it's on. Yeah. Mhm. I think I can control it from down here.
Good for you. Keep me going. Before you start, Bruce just said, hey, don't forget the minutes. And has everybody had a chance to go over the minutes we had on 3 May? Do we have additions or corrections? Can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second?
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye and raising your hand for the TV
Aye.
camera.
Aye.
Great, we're good to go. Now, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner.
Thanks,
Hopefully we'll
Bruce.
get the video working here in a moment. But again, I'll apologize for Dave. He did alert us this morning that, or actually late last night, he was admitted to the hospital. We knew he was not going to be physically here today because he had been having some issues, and they didn't want him sitting in a car for 2 hours driving down or sitting through a meeting for a period of time. So anyway, we had kind of made arrangements to have him remote in, but then we heard from him last night. They actually admitted him yesterday, and he'll be in at least for the foreseeable future doing whatever testing they're doing. So we'll try to, we had been through kind of the presentation 2 weeks ago. There were some updates he was going to make to it. So just bear with us as we try to work our way through his presentation today, because it was definitely a last minute thing on our parts as well. But we certainly didn't want to cancel because we missed June. And there's a lot of things we can talk about, because I know there was a lot of issues we've been talking about in kind of the open forum kind of part that we can either bring back up and try to bring resolution to some of them maybe.
Monitor will cooperate.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the technology working for us.
While we're waiting, Kevin,
Sure.
so is this the recap of what we saw last month?
Yeah, there's a
The
lot
answering
of,
some of those questions.
especially early on with kind of a retouch, because we'd missed, it's been 60 days or so since. So you'll see a lot of that stuff that we'd already talked about. And we can bring a lot of that back up if we want to refresh everybody's mind. Or my thought was we'll kind of breeze through it, because I think everybody's been pretty well engaged and up to speed on what's been happening.
Kevin, there was something that you were going to provide hard copies that was a long document.
I was from last time?
I think it was in your email.
Yeah, we didn't get it in time to provide hard copies. Has everybody who wanted a hard copy of the spreadsheet that we had at the last meeting? I know we had a download of the presentation, but we didn't have it. You couldn't read the little spreadsheet in that presentation. And I said I would get that, and I'm wondering if everybody has had a chance to access that spreadsheet or look for it. There was a small one that had percentages that Kevin and Evan had worked out of percentages of, there were 3 parts. There was a part for salaries, and a part for supplies, and a part for all the other stuff. The other stuff included the CapEx, and I'm just wondering if anybody saw that or wanted to see it, or still haven't had a chance.
You sent it over a month ago, is that the spreadsheet?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I saw that, thank you. I mean, but
I'll send it again if anybody missed it, because it's not a big, I'll just send it to everybody again. It's not a big spreadsheet, it's not a big file.
It's a big spreadsheet, but it's not a big file, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry, the Commissioners' Workshop only adjourned about 15 minutes ago. So I haven't had time to get my act together.
We'll
But
blame
then
it on
again, that's
Suzanne.
par of the course for me.
yeah,
Last item on the agenda.
yeah, no, my husband and I were like ships passing in the night. He was parting the.
We didn't get that option. We're good. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Linda. All right, so just a quick touch on what we had planned to talk about today. Many of those were items from last 2 months ago that we wanted to kind of touch on again. We talked a lot about the funding options, whether it was going to be new revenue, whether it was going to be reapportioned existing revenue, or some combination of the other. Had a big discussion about outreach, and I think we kind of settled on it. That's a huge component of whatever it is we're going to do. Whether or not this goes forward or not, we need to do a better job from the city's perspective of educating the residents and visitors to the importance of stormwater management and doing the little things that help improve our water quality throughout the town, as well as our two major lakes. This was kind of a recap of where we were financially, what we foresee as being the budget in the next couple of years. You know, quite a few folks, portions of quite a few folks, about 300,000 a year, a lot of equipment, and again, most of those are partials of that piece of equipment, and that was all in that spreadsheet that Dave has worked up with Evan and my help, and then that I think the commissioner provided a month or so ago. A lot of contracts that do stormwater, certainly some of the Sposato is some that we have with respect to the smaller things we do on a routine basis throughout the city. Capital projects varied greatly based upon, you know, some of those projects were very large and very expensive, so it varied in whatever year. I think he took it out 4 years that we're looking out. Came to whatever that, it was based upon what year it was and the impact of the budget. And then our O&M typical cost about $600K per year for just the operations and maintenance. And then if you add the capital, obviously it bumps to 8 point something or 0.8 and then 1.5. And again, I do need to caveat that, you know, those estimates for the Bayard Avenue storm sewer upgrade, it's probably 4 or 5 years old since that report was done. So if anything, those capital numbers are probably a little on the low side, but in the ballpark. I won't begin to try to explain Bert's chart on what revenue goes where it comes from, other than we certainly get a lot from parking, which we all rely on. And then there's kind of a breakout. I think this is all old news. I think you saw all this, where the revenue goes and by component. And I guess those two things get really critical if the decision is you want to use, you know, existing revenue to kind of do some of these things, or even in a hybrid kind of model, then this will get more and more important to us.
Yeah, if we attempt to fund these needed expenses out of a utility, it would be almost prohibitive to cost each one per year. So we're going to almost have to talk about getting some of that money out of the general fund, the city fund.
So these were the options, you know, kind of talked about pay as you go, which, you know, causes the peaks and valleys that are tough to manage. You know, go finance it. I don't know that the city is really interested in taking on a lot of additional debt. We're still working off the outfall and City Hall loans that Bert just refinanced to save us a little bit of money last year. And then I guess the capitalization recovery fees, kind of difficult for us to really make any money off of that because we're pretty much all built out. So that's not a real good option for us, but one that we should consider. Grants and loans, we're very successful at getting kind of the small stuff, right? We get a $50,000 grant, you know, for studies and some stormwater. In fact, we got one for drinking water just recently. So, but that's not going to pay for the quality or the types of projects that we think we want to undertake under the stormwater program. Again, the loan, state revolving fund loans, they come with somewhere in the 2 to 3% interest range. So, you know, again, we have a bunch of those on the sewer side, not a lot on, some on water and none that I'm aware of on the purely the stormwater side. And then public-private partnerships, it adds a whole new degree of difficulty to try to do something like that for us. But again, an option that's out there. So I guess this kind of touches on, you know, what we talked about last time as well with, you know, the whole idea of having a fee-based program provides a more stable kind of revenue stream, lets you plan for those kinds of things. You know, and there's the downsides as well. It's okay, well, when do we stop just spending money? Right? So all good things. I'm just going to touch this real quickly because I don't know if he showed these last time or not, but I know there was a lot of discussion here about the public outreach and the need to just to educate folks. These came from a national survey that was done by some engineering consultant last year that talked about the biggest issues, and if hopefully you can kind of read it, but they're a second issue right there, public, whatever it says. But that whole outreach thing and education for the public is vitally important. And I think he had a second piece as well, public something. But just to highlight that, I think we were on the right track with is certainly a big need to just make sure the public is aware, and what we're doing just on a very inexpensive way to educate them could pay us big dividends as well. Again, another just more data points on the outreach piece. And then, yeah, we did go over this one. So short term, yes, and long term, yes. The city has, certainly our office has bought into this fact, and we'll work with Lynn to make sure that we have a good comprehensive outreach program, that we're touching folks more than just once a year when we do the brief to the commissioners. We'll throw stuff in the water bill and throw stuff out on the web and those kind of things just to help keep people engaged in smart practices.
I'm going to stop you for just a second. Susan, were you able to get the video hooked up? Were you going to hook up a video?
Susan Stewart?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't recall that. What video was I gonna hook
I
up?
thought you were going to hook up the Arlington
Oh,
video.
no, I'm
That was
just
in Janice?
looking, for my own purposes, I'm reading on my iPad.
No, before the meeting started.
I was just looking for a link to the
I
internet.
thought you had
Sorry.
Elise's
No.
Arlington video.
Sorry.
Sorry, keep going.
And we can find it.
Yeah.
Do you want
There
me
is
to
a
find it?
phenomenal
Do you have it to
video
email it to me?
on a phenomenal
A
website.
good day to show it, for sure. If you can
Yeah,
get it
and
on.
I was
Can
thinking,
Elise email it to you?
Yeah, sure.
Do it?
she emailed it to me and I looked at it, it was
I can
great.
find it.
But I thought, at that point in time, I didn't realize that Dave wasn't going to be here.
Right, yeah.
So I thought, man, this would be a great time to look at
Yeah,
that
no, I
video.
don't mind showing it. It'd be good. I haven't looked at it, so I'm assuming it's good.
That's dangerous.
They're pretty good, right? And we talked about this, and I think Bert would tell us, in fact, we know Bert would tell us, it's gonna be hard to try to allocate resources from other subcomponents of the budget. It would just be kind of a general fund kind of thing, however he ends up working it, or however we end up recommending it. It wouldn't say, well, we're gonna reduce hotel taxes by X%, because he just doesn't manage our budget that way.
That doesn't mean we can't do it.
Correct, that's right.
Doesn't mean we can't do it.
Right.
I'm a big fan of earmarking, and there are times when it would really be valuable to sell a project to voters. I'm sorry, keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah, sure. Again, here's where he's still more on the revenue piece, so where Bert gets, where the city gets the money. All right, so I guess this is where we kind of talk about what the task force is thinking with respect to how to fund projects. And again, all these things are, I guess all our discussions are based on the premise that we want to continue to move forward with this. There is always going to be a point in time where we go, just not worth it. We're not even going to pursue any more of the utility piece. But I think until you get to that point, you got to proceed like we are, and we want to do this. So that's the way we're kind of presenting it, is we're presenting it that, yep, we're moving forward, but there is always a cutoff point at the end where you're going to get to say, well, what do we want to take to the Board of Commissioners? Do we want to take a recommendation for yay or a recommendation for nay? But we're treating it, it doesn't do us any good to assume no, right? So we're going to assume yes, and we're just going to keep moving until you tell us, now we're done with this. Okay? So now maybe if we could just entertain some discussion about what's the feeling on.
I was going to say that it would be helpful to know how, if the answer to the stormwater utility is no, what would the expenditures look like? In other words, what would happen to the city budget? What would be forsaken in favor of the expenditures, or how would it delay expenditures?
Sure, I think in general, it would just be that they would then compete with other needs. So other capital needs. So if you've got, you know, a sewer line repair that you need to do versus a stormwater repair versus a water repair, then it would be up to us to make a recommendation to the board to say, okay, this is where I would rank the priorities, and then they would vote at budget time. Obviously, when both water and wastewater are regulated, right? So you have somebody hammering on you that say you must do these things. So they typically would rise to a little higher on the priority level but when fighting for resources against, you know, a different project. We typically would try to balance it. I mean, in my mind, I try to balance it. You know, I don't want to do all water one year and forsaking everything else. But as we work through our list of recommendations and priorities, you know, the regulated stuff rises faster than the unregulated things. So.
And do we anticipate a surplus over the next 12 months, the next 24 months in the operating budget?
I always go at it of the approach that no, we're staying the same, right? I think this year, if you listen to the presentations on the parking revenues for this year, they're certainly up from last year. But the other big moneymaker is the transfer tax that, you know, is kind of fluctuates. So Bert goes, we're not raising that in our budget forecasting at all, because he always goes back to 2008 or whatever when it crashed, and he's very conservative in his budgeting. So he forces that on all of us, which is great, right? Because we don't want to get in a bad place financially as a city. So we start at that level, and then I don't think we ever forecast much of an increase in the revenues coming in. We try to keep it flatlined, and then when we get that surplus, then it's like, okay, now we have a little more breathing room, or we can add those projects back in, that kind of thing.
I sent us we all received a copy of our budget last year. It was the work we were doing in March. It wasn't the final budget, but it was within 4 or 5 weeks of being the final budget. And on the last page of that, we talked about capital improvement expenses for the city. And the stormwater projections are on that CIP chart at the last few pages of that budget. And you can see what a big dent it takes for the stormwater CapEx when you look at the overall budget. And it's significant.
My thought is that the answer to the question that you were just talking about is the status quo.
You're right, that's the status quo was on that budget.
So,
We go into it with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've sat through some of our budget gyrations.
so the way to get out of the status quo, if stormwater is important, is to come up with a way to break it out of that status quo.
That's a way. Because the two big ones are very, hugely expensive, right? The Byard Avenue Storm Sewer upgrade, which is just undersized for the way the city is now. And then that Deer Park, I guess, Basin 40, which doesn't have stormwater infrastructure. So now you're going in brand new and digging everything up and putting new pipe in and drains and all those things. So it's just, they're expensive.
And Jay, you sent us that, with the agenda, the copy of all the I guess it's the regulations, and you pointed to section 9 and 10.
Yes.
Of those. And I was just, and maybe this is a basic question, but are we today a designated, is City of Rehoboth Beach designated as a stormwater?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we're a delegated authority. Isn't that correct, Kevin? As a municipality in Delaware, we are a delegated authority under 5101, which is part of Title VII.
Yeah, all that's Greek to me, Commissioner.
I think we are, Letitia.
So-
So I think we can set our own rules.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because as I was reading through those, it seems like the state, because the state has, if we're set up for 5 years and then they review us after 5 years to see if they're going to redesignate us, that means that we're responsible for meeting all that criteria that they've outlined in those
Correct.
regulations. So if we are today a designated district, are we in compliance?
So we are not, if that's.
We're
the-
not an MS4.
Correct. We are not regulated at this point.
We're not
So-
regulated at
Correct.
this
So that goes back to, I think, one of my very first comments when we got together was, I want to do what they would require us to do, but I don't want them telling me what to do. You know, you want to act like you're regulated, but not be regulated.
How
So
do you
there's not
do
a
that?
hammer. If we had an emergency and we need to do something else, you know, we're not,
But how can you be designated and then not be regulated?
I don't know your terminology on designated.
Well,
We
you
have
know,
not been, we've.
I think we were a
have not been
delegated, as
regulated under
Letitia's
MS4.
talking about section 9, which gives the rules and regulations for delegated authorities. And I think we are. And it maybe even mentions conservation districts, cities, municipalities
Counties.
in that section, which we are. And I think we're allowed to set our own rules, as you said. We're not gonna have any trouble with the meeting the regulations. We'll go above that. And
I think that's
But I
true.
guess my question is, if that designation is for 5 years, where are we today in those 5 years? And when we go up for review to be renewed as a delegated, or whatever,
Yeah, well, I will claim
what's our
ignorance
status, I guess
on
is my
what that
question.
clause actually says and means, because I'm not familiar with that terminology.
I'd
We're
be
a
surprised,
designated.
we'd all be surprised if they're gonna enforce that immediately. We're probably gonna, DNREC is gonna give us slack. They're gonna let us do our own.
What I understand is, DNREC has the ability to require municipalities to come under a permit, general stormwater permitting, and they haven't done it for Rehoboth yet. But every so often, they'll announce the following cities are now required, but there's a whole process, like it won't happen overnight. You know, they kind of work with us, but right now, we're still, I would think we're still, the state could still come in and regulate pollution in the city, but we're not under a permitting scheme where we have to submit our best management practices and so forth at this point. But the trend is that more and more, every so often they announce more municipalities are now under this program.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is because, I don't want us to be set up to, if we're not meeting some requirement of the state because we're designated, I don't want to be set up that we're scrambling to try to meet whatever requirements we are
Yeah.
obligated to meet.
I highly believe that they're gonna let us alone as long as we're working on our stormwater utility. Once we get the feasibility, once we get past the feasibility part and get into the utility part and get that under ordinance, I suspect they'll take a look at it as is prescribed in 5101 and probably either agree or disagree. But as long as we're meeting all the rules and regulations, I agree with Kevin. They're gonna let us alone and let us work progress. In fact, they're chipping in with the funds now and then as we go forward.
But my sense is if we don't do that, then they're gonna come in.
Right.
If we don't expend effort doing just what we're doing, and I think I explained that in my email a little bit. If we don't expend effort in doing just what we're doing, and we're doing that right now, they'll probably want to talk about it, but
They're-
we're
they're-
working on it.
They're moving to smaller and smaller municipalities, and they see the beach communities as a whole as something that they want to take on.
Yeah, the tax ditches, say that again.
The beach communities.
The beach communities.
Beach communities, yeah, they're worried about resilience, but they've been good with us on that.
Well, I think I think most of us want to stay ahead of that, like
Right, I
keep
think that's
Lake,
what Kevin
Silver
was
Lake and Lake Gerard, we want them to be cleaner. We want to, avoid potential, issues with DNREC. But back to the funding, which I'm a little concerned that, for instance, Kevin, you mentioned that stormwater in the budget, and you're absolutely right, competes with major expenses for water and wastewater, but I don't know. I feel the infrastructure, all of it, it's not, we're not going to get a lot of pushback I don't believe, from the property owners here. We all want to safeguard our water supply. If you've seen the discussion in the town of Lewis, I mean, we want to get ahead of it. Wastewater, there's no doubt in my mind, we need to continue to, all 4 phases of the plant upgrade. So stormwater to me is in the same sort of bucket of essential, non-discretionary spending. My issue would be that we talk, at least discuss a little bit, that the major other competing new expense is the Baltimore and Wilmington Avenue streetscape, which hasn't gone into the budget yet. But if you look at it, let's call stormwater $1.5 to $2 million a year for the next 10 years. If streetscape were to be deferred, I believe the revenue level, even if you assume that, and I think Bert is prudent to be conservative, I don't think transfer taxes will continue to rise the way they did in late 2020 and all of 2021. And we also had that over $1 million sale of Kent Street. You know, the city, has a total of maybe 6 properties total. They don't have a huge inventory of property to sell every year. So to me, I think there has to be a discussion of what's a priority to the residents. Do they want to see higher taxes, or do they want to and be able to fund both stormwater and streetscape, or maybe do they want to make the infrastructure, the stormwater, more important? I personally would rather see Bayard Avenue, King Charles, all of the infrastructure given a higher priority than almost anything else. But that's just.
And I think you heard Kevin say that phase 4 of the wastewater treatment asset management plan is probably the highest priority. We're
As it should be, absolutely.
probably going to be spending all available funds on that as much as we can afford. And I'm just thinking that stormwater probably, if you ask the commissioners if they would prioritize stormwater above the Wilmington-Baltimore streetscape, they'd probably say stormwater.
Well, that's good, because that's, Baltimore Ave, Wilmington is like $40 to $50 million. It may even go above that, right, by the time we're ready to.
Yeah, the last I
break
heard was
ground.
34 or something like that. We'll probably go, and I'm sure we will, we're gonna go ahead and fund the Baltimore lifeguard headquarters and their comfort station there. But we may not go too much past that as far as funding competing parts of that Wilmington-Baltimore task force. At least not as long as I'm a commissioner.
I mean, I was just trying to bring in what are the looming major expenses
Phase
that
4.
people desire,
phase
which, a lot of people really, they've worked hard on Baltimore, Wilmington Avenue streetscape. They want it badly, both, well, a lot of people do, but that would be the context for me, that's what we're looking at, whether we keep, spend pretty, pretty steadily on multiple projects, or whether we make the infrastructure the top priority and sort of defer some of these other things.
Frank?
Yeah, I think Bruce pointed out that if we don't have a dedicated funding stream for this projects, that they are in competition and not as likely to get done. Did you not point out at one point that?
They're not getting done now.
Yeah, and if you combine that with what Kevin wants to do, which is to be compliant without the necessity for being compliant, so as to forestall being made to do it, then given those two things, I think we really need to go ahead with this task force and create the utility commission for it, because it's, you just can't kind of combine those two goals without that. Competing in the regular general fund is probably going to, it's just going to be kind of tough. There's always going to be something popping up every year that's going to be playing tug of war for these funds.
Jay, would you be willing to take sort of a preliminary vote? Like, you've already basically stated that you feel we need this dedicated stormwater utility assessed,
Right.
assessed on property owners. Would you be willing, I mean, I'd be curious if everybody else feels that way and I'm the lone person
I
who
think
feels.
we had, I think we
that
had
last meeting.
consensus at the last meeting that we were in favor of alternate funding, which meant that we were in favor of funding the stormwater expenses somewhere besides out of the general fund, which is status quo.
Okay, well, maybe
fun-
it seemed as though we were proceeding to explore all possibilities, but I didn't
Yeah.
realize, we didn't take a formal vote
No,
on that.
we had consensus, and I think we were exploring alternate ways other ways of doing the alternate funding. And I'm almost positive that our next step is to decide if we want to, how we want to do that, how we want to explore our alternate funding, which I'm thinking that by far the best way is to do a measurement of impervious surface.
So there's no one else who feels maybe this extra.
There might be,
Part of the bureaucracy to
would we
administer it.
like to,
You-
there are
you-
people
you
who know
polled
more about this than I
everyone
do.
Last meeting.
Say again?
I just watched the meeting, you polled everyone in the
We sure
last
did.
meeting, and you didn't want to take a formal vote.
No,
on it.
we didn't want
You
to
polled everybody for their opinion, and it was clear that there was a majority.
Most of us are in favor of alternate funding, and
And so I think the questions now really kind of come down to what's in and what's out of that, within that scope, of whether we're going to do this as a capital projects or whether this is continuing operations funding, and then figure out how it's to be implemented as far as the funding goes, whether this is
yeah.
a fee based on permeable square footage or.
Right, because we also still owe you, like, numbers. We've talked about what's it really mean to a homeowner. If we say, yeah, we're gonna do a fee, what's it cost our typical 100 by 50, 50 by 100 lot? So we have to get that for you. Before we get to there, we're gonna talk about who should be included in that, right? I mean, are we gonna send a bill to the feds for the post office?
Everybody.
And
Are we gonna send a bill to DelDOT for their streets within? Are we gonna build a
Good luck with
city?
that.
Are we gonna build a city for our properties that we do? So those are the kind of things we've gotta get to. So at this point, to Kevin Williams, it's probably premature to say, hey, we don't wanna go any farther with this, because you don't really know the numbers. We could say, we're gonna fund all those stormwater projects and it's cost every resident $1. We said, well, yeah, let's do it, right? But we owe you that detail on what it's gonna cost. We're just not there yet.
And we
We've
don't
gotta
know what's in it
solve some
now,
of these
too.
other
I mean,
questions
it's a
first.
big difference if we're just doing capital improvements as opposed to the running budget. which
Correct.
is-
Whether you do all
And
or half.
that also kind of comes back to what Jan and other people were talking about selling this to the public. It's like, what are we selling? What, we're starting a new source of revenue. What's it for? I mean, I don't think we've really determined that yet. And I don't know what to tell people. Is this for
Well-
capital improvements or is this the entire stormwater budget?
as you remember, Dave showed the impervious basis of the square footage,
Right.
and he had it all laid out for us. It was, Kevin may have that, but we have 5.7 million square feet of single-family residence. We have 3.1 million square feet of non-residents. We have 133,000 square feet of church and nonprofit, and we have 5.7 million square feet of roads, streets, per impervious asphalt in the city. Do you remember that? That's, Kevin may be getting that slide up.
There were a number of slides.
Elise's video.
Hmm?
Elise's video.
Blame me.
I'm sorry that I didn't, I thought maybe we had that, but we don't have that.
We're getting it right now.
No, Kevin's got it.
Oh, Kevin, you getting it?
We're getting the link, right, but.
Okay. Let me go out. I have not left this room since about 8:20 this morning. Let me go out and get my handouts while Kevin's putting that up. I want everybody to have a handout of 5101.
Kevin, I've got a question while he's doing that. If we were trying to look at a hybrid or trying to look at extracting everything out into some other fee structure, and you put up some figures earlier today about the cost of personnel, partial. Is it reasonable to ask the question, is there a number that we would be in a position to propose that would say, we're going to take those costs that are currently being paid out of the general fund out of the general fund so that it reduces the tax burden on the general fund for those pieces that are going to come into the utility? Or is it seen that the utility is set up kind of separate and leaving the general fund alone?
So I think if I got your question correct, I think the hybrid would be some of each, right? You would take capital, say, probably do all of capital out of the general fund or out of the utility, or all of the O&M out of the capital or out of the general budget or the utility. So I think those would be the packaging
So it's
components.
mix and match.
Could be, if that's what,
Potentially pulling pieces out of the general fund.
correct, or just continue to pay for portions of it out of the general fund.
Well, that was something I had raised like back in April, whether 50% could be, could come from parking revenue that is easy to increase. Like we missed an opportunity in February, but there are promises anyway that by, I guess, this fall, ahead of summer 2023. So if 50%, that would be a compromise, were to come either from increased parking revenue or whatever, and maybe the other 50% were to come from a stormwater utility. I'm still worried this is yet another bureaucratic paperwork here in City Hall, and I'm just surprised everybody likes to go this, let's make government bigger route, because, we know that government intervention doesn't usually solve problems as well as, the private sector. Like incentives to plant trees are different from just looking at an existing house and evaluating like a driveway that was put in 25 years ago. So I think there are ways to structure things to incentivize more green space. But when 75% of the stormwater runoff in this town is generated by commercial or nonprofit enterprises, you're really sort of spending a lot of time on single-family homes, which only generate, as a whole, 25% of the stormwater runoff. So to me, it's a lot of work for a goal that could be achieved in a more expedient and less painful way.
The inverse of that, though, that we can't assess property tax on the streets, for instance.
Right.
Or the
I
city,
would not even try
or the
to go to
state.
Del Dot.
But in
Or
fact,
City
this
Hall.
commission possibly could. I mean, so it might have a wider,
Well, if we
base of
assess City
revenue
Hall,
than our
it's,
property taxes.
I mean,
The point
and
of my question was, is there some way that we can pull some costs out of what's already
Right.
budgeted so that it's not all new?
It's a relatively small amount of money that's operation and maintenance. It's $600,000 annually. So the rest of it, if the sheet that we were given, that we looked at earlier, it's capital is between $280,000 and $915,000 a year. So to reduce it by an $18 million budget by $600,000 and put that cost in to the utility is a very small reduction in people's property taxes.
And therefore
Not worth doing.
It could or it could not be. It depends upon how it's set up. If there's additional funds, in my experience, in my community, we had 3 cents on the tax rate that was dedicated to stormwater management capital projects. So when we set up the utility, we automatically reduced the tax rate by 3 cents.
we did the same thing.
Okay, so if we do that, but my point is $600,000, what percentage of that is, I'm not that good at figuring that out.
Of our overall budget?
Yeah, is your overall budget
Oh,
is 18
it's-
million, correct?
Yeah, it's like 5%, no, we're 30 million, yeah, it's like 5%.
Well, then if you could reduce it, then that may be, and putting all the operations in capital into a utility, that there would be a charge for that. In Delaware, are nonprofits and organizations such as churches, are they charged property taxes or are they tax exempt?
They're property tax exempt, but we have calculated their square footage.
Okay, no, I understand that, but the question is, do they now pay property taxes? And the answer is no, but they would pay a stormwater utility. Correct, okay.
Is everybody comfortable with that? I mean, I'm not a particularly religious person, but I feel that the churches add, add value to our town, and nonprofits like Camp Rehoboth is beloved of a lot of people. I don't happen to be, a member of Camp Rehoboth, but I know a lot of my close friends and neighbors are. It's like, I feel this is sort of an exercise in pushing money around. Are we going to exempt? I would be in favor, for instance, if this were to be adopted, in exempting houses of worship and nonprofits like Camp Rehoboth. So we're not going to be collecting money there. Or does everyone else think we should assess
I think part of the
They're
part of
so,
it is
they
is
have some of the
purpose, yeah.
biggest impervious surfaces.
Indeed, they do.
So if one of the benefits of the utility is to be able to target the impact, then that's one of the primary benefits. So how can you exempt them?
So everybody would be fine with charging
Yeah,
them a
absolutely. I
stormwater
mean,
utility,
This
okay?
is a community problem. I mean, the churches are not exempt from the stormwater crisis which we face.
True
You
enough.
know what I mean? I can see it as, they have significant exemptions for taxes now, but they are part of the community, we all are, so we all put our shoulder to this.
Janice
Everyone,
and Bruce.
everybody who generates runoff is.
What did you do?
fair game as far as
What did your communities do? Did you charge?
In Virginia,
Yeah.
you can exempt taxes, you cannot exempt fees. So there was no option. So once we set up the utility, we were required to charge everyone a fee because it's considered to be a fee.
So does anyone know what that comparable regulation
Legal
is
question, I
in
don't-
Delaware?
I think Dave said that it had been challenged by some religious institutions, and I think he said they won but I can't remember. He has particulars, and I can't remember what they were. Janice, I made a mistake. I said 5%, it's 2%. The $1.5 million a year is 5%.
Janice, were you collecting from the Virginia Department of Transportation, since roadways, represent, no, okay, I didn't think so. And
We collected from nonprofits, from some levels of government as well.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see if we could get money out of DelDOT.
But it's gonna be broader than the property taxes, that's for sure.
Oh, of course. We have to have a fee if we're gonna go for alternate funding.
At public buy-in on this, you could say that we are funding projects that are deferred maintenance projects that need to be done, and we are investing in the future here, and that
Protecting
we are
the
broadening
environment.
the base of input, and we're reducing your property taxes by 1%, and I think you'll get buy-in.
Point of where I was going was, it helps in the messaging of selling it to the public when you say it's reducing something.
As we all talked about time, I reviewed the last meeting, and we really did. We talked education, outreach, and I think all of us are in agreement that that's job one.
So that would argue, as far as this funding model, to use the operation and maintenance and roll that into this, so that we could offer a income tax relief of some sort. So the entire stormwater, both capital improvements and operation management, would be all in the budget.
Yeah, I think we owe you that data, right? I don't think we're there yet.
Well, it is what it is. I mean, we
Because
can
it-
talk in broad terms here.
When you see the big picture and you said, okay, here's what it means, do you want to bite all that off in a fee, or do you want, then you want to divvy it up? I think we're getting there. We're not there yet to know whether or not we want to do it all under the utility, part under the utility. or
Bruce and
nothing.
Janice have real firsthand experience in this. And so what are you for rolling it all into
I'm
the
not,
operation and maintenance and the general and capital
I have
improvements?
experience with having done it that way,
Yeah,
but I'm open to seeing what this situation is.
And I think every situation is different. And if a decision is to set up a utility, it could be funded through a fee to homeowners and to property owners in general. But in this particular community, you could take a portion, you could raise let's say the parking fees a certain amount and direct that fund, that money into this particular fund. There could be other fee structures that would be set up for renovations, for new buildings or whatever. So there's a variety of way to look at it, to look at a utility. The question is a utility the best way to develop a multi-year stormwater program? The simplest thing is that the commissioners would simply raise our property taxes. Get it over with, boom. You wouldn't have to do this, but is that the best way to do it?
Well, and Jay mentioned,
Or will it be consistent?
yeah, and it sounds like, and Jay mentioned, you mentioned earmark earlier. So, and what you're describing, Janice, is that raise property taxes, but earmark whatever is required to fund the stormwater program. Is that where you're kind of leaning toward?
That's a possibility.
It's all borne by the property owners. I think I said back in April, I even suggested that, bump up property taxes a little bit to avoid all this administration of a new utility, and that maybe for 50% of the $1.5 to $2 million a year we're gonna need, and the other 50% should come from whatever modifications are made to the parking enforcement, both rates and season. Yeah, that's 50-50, and we don't need a dedicated utility. We just sell it as property taxes which haven't gone up since 2019, need to rise to cover the stormwater, the necessary stormwater infrastructure expenses. I mean, I don't think we'd have a lot of pushback on that, as long as the visitors, who are absolutely should be asked to bear some of this, are being charged more for parking or whatever we come up with.
The one thing about earmarks in a budget is they are not transparent to the average person. They don't understand. Most people don't take time to look at the budget. I think probably many people in this room look at budgets, look at municipal budgets. Most people don't do that. One of the really positive things about a stormwater utility is that when you pay a certain amount of money, you know exactly where that money is going to go. Yeah, you know what it's going to be used for. It's not going to be used for a $30 million streetscape program on Baltimore or Wilmington. It's going to be used specifically to improve stormwater management and to help protect the environment.
So your idea of sort of incorporating it to the property taxes, to me, is a good one. But we're still not going to go down, but unless you insist on going this separate stormwater utility fee.
All I'm saying is that having earmarks is not as transparent as establishing a utility. I just wanted to point that out.
I guess the other thing is that, I'm from Texas, and in Texas, we don't have income tax. Everything is paid through the property tax. So my property tax in San Antonio has an item for the school district, an item for the utility, an item for, the San Antonio water system. So, but it's built into the property tax that I pay. So, that's the other thing. You could have a separate utility. It's funded through something that's added into the property tax. But it's designated for that utility in this case.
But most people don't know what that means.
Right, but and it's a very, and you can go on the Bear County, website, it explains all the different, districts that are, your property tax is funding. But, I mean, that's, yeah, you'd have to go do that research.
I paid property tax in Texas for 20 years, and that's right, that's how they do it. But
I have a question regarding the property tax, but the property tax, I mean, I don't know, I don't understand, is a commercial property with a large amount of impervious surfaces, are they paying a disproportionate share of property taxes? In other words, is there a two-structure thing that already sort of builds in the nexus between impervious structures and the amount you pay in taxes? So with that, if we bump up everybody, residents and commercial, do we basically achieve the lion's share of funding coming from the places with more impervious surface? I don't know.
the answer is no, if we bump it up right now on a percentage of property tax. The commercial, Dave broke this out, but our commercial property taxes is just damn near nil, and bumping them up wouldn't do much.
That would be useful information for us to have, to see, like, I don't know what the Sands Hotel is, what its assessed value is. I have no idea.
You can look that up on the Sussex County website.
Okay, so that would be useful information to have if our commercial property, well, I'm talking about the city property taxes, the Sands Hotel.
Yeah.
I've seen residential rate, I can look up on the portal various residences, residential addresses. Am I also able to look up, like,
No, only
1
county.
Baltimore Avenue and see the,
yeah.
what the Sands pays to the city?
No, I think,
I was having trouble doing that.
I'm not sure that you can find how much
I think it's
tax
just
there.
residential, so that, if you were able to get that from Evan Miller or from someone else, give us an approximation. Like, what is the Sands Hotel deemed to be worth, $80 million, and what are they paying in property taxes, and like, versus what we're paying to the city of Rehoboth only? I can't worry about Sussex County at this point, because we're trying to alter the bill to the city of Rehoboth, potentially with the property tax bill if we incorporate it.
Yeah.
So I would love to see data on some of the larger hotels, which obviously have a ton of impervious space. Some of them don't even have any shrubs surrounding them.
Yeah. I think the answer I gave Susan still holds. The property tax for commercial properties in Rehoboth is just rock bottom. So
Well,
we,
rock bottom the way the residential property tax rate is sort of rock bottom in some ways.
yeah, that's true too. Commercial property tax is even rocker bottom.
Well, that sounds regressive and not good. So, yeah,
So-
do you think you would be could you request some data just for some, maybe
We
a
could-
dozen of the larger
We could request data, we could request numbers.
Great.
I think where you're headed, and I think where we all should be headed, is most of the expenses that we have go toward maintaining our tourist trade. It's like, I think I figured 85% of our revenue, or maybe it was Paul Coons that figured it, 85% of our revenue is tourist related. Property taxes are $2 million a year out of a $30 million budget. And then we get more money from landlord rental taxes than we do from property taxes. We're gonna get close to as much money out of just our hotel tax. We're gonna get half that this year out of our hotel tax. So those probably, if you were gonna, this is my thinking, if you were going to fund a stormwater utility, you'd want to take that money as much as you could from those types of revenues.
Well, the only caveat I would raise is that, we have 1,500, say, full-time residents. We spend $3 million on our police department. Virtually all of that is because of the tourists, in my view. So I'm not in I don't think our property taxes are necessarily low when one examines a lot of the services in this town, which are only at the scale they need to be because of all the visitors and tourists. So I
agree.
can't, I'm not on board for starting to look at the property taxes right now at this
Yeah.
point as being lower than they should be.
And I
don't
think
know,
this
there's always
committee-
that tension between, right, full-time residents and the tourists, right? They're only the size that they are because you have the big influx in the summer. But if you didn't have that big influx in the summer, then your property taxes would be way up.
Way higher.
Because of the services that come, because you wouldn't have a fire station in town. You wouldn't have EMS parked down the street from here.
Right.
Those kind of things. So
And wouldn't have the
I hear
parking
all that.
revenue
I
we
don't,
have.
and
Well,
I don't
There's a
necessarily
lot,
buy into
there's a
it,
lot of
but-
stuff that if you
Correct.
were to dig, we recently learned, for instance, that Henlopen Acres and North Shores, where some of the most affluent members of 19971 live, in total only contribute $1,000 a year to the Rehoboth Beach Fire Department. Now, which is the fire department which rescued President Biden a month ago. So, I mean, if we start getting into that, I don't know, I think it's a never-ending discussion. You're right, former Mayor Coons did present a chart. I took total issue with it because it downplayed a lot of the services that are only as even close to as large as they are because of the tourist season. But anyway, back to this utility. I'm just not, I don't know why you think people will be so much happier to know this is a separate stormwater utility earmarked only for stormwater. I think they sort of look at the bottom line of their bills, both, property taxes, refuse, whatever else they pay to the city, and they're not, if it's not exorbitant, they're going to be okay with it if they learn that a lot of it's being spent on these drainage issues and also dredging the lakes, which are, and potentially sending more of that to the wastewater treatment plant. Would you agree that maybe that's something we need to look into, like?
I don't know that we're gonna
Beyond the
dredge the
scope
lakes
of
and pump it
this.
to this
Yeah,
wastewater treatment plant.
can we
Yes.
re-poll just to see where we all stand?
Good idea.
Maybe bring this back to
Yeah.
somewhere?
Do you want to?
Let me just throw one more thing out there, and I said it before, but I think we have the cart before the horse. We need to show you the impacts, right? Before you decide, well, I can't pay for it all out of the fee. I need to get you.
What are we waiting on?
So we need to work it, it's slow, I will tell you, and
Okay.
we're gonna miss Dave not being here today, but the things like I mentioned earlier, do we wanna send a bill to the feds for the post office and our likelihood of getting it, right? Do we wanna charge Del Dot? Do we wanna charge those tax exempt properties like churches? So those are the kind of things, because that's gonna impact the numbers, the dollars that would go into that fee, and who is gonna help pay a portion of that. And then do we wanna go, we'll look at it, as he started with the breakout of the different areas within town, is impervious area a good way to help, balance that? Because, right now, nice 50 by 100-foot lot with a small cottage on it really isn't impacting the stormwater a whole lot. But as Suzanne said, the Sands, with a big, huge hotel and a lot of flat roof, is contributing more. So what's a fair way of allocating those costs? And we'll show you some of that, a typical 50 by 100 lot, a big lot, big house, small lot. We had trouble kind of getting site-specific data out of our system to be able to do that. So his intent is to go pick 5 or 6 or 8 actual parcels, hopefully you won't be able to say that, hey, that's my house, you can't be showing that kind of thing. So he's trying to have some sort of discretion in what he puts up there, but to have specific examples of, what that impervious surface coverage does, and here's what they pay in property taxes, here's what big hotel pays, and is that a fair breakout for the cost sharing or cost funding for the stormwater? And
So just so
Isn't
I
that
understand.
the way we do it with water and sewage? I mean, essentially, these are
we
our
can measure that.
utilities that we charge by how much you use. And so why would it be any different? It would be a square footage of runoff is how much you're using the system, and you would be another item on when you get the city bill and we have income tax bill, but we also have our utility bill for water, sewer, trash, stormwater. I mean, I think it's pretty simple. I don't see it as a huge thing bureaucracy-wise. And one of the things that Janice clicked in my mind as far as the earmarks go is that you could earmark some of the parking. So you could consider parking, like the parking lot out here, as a generator of runoff and earmark a percentage of the revenues from that into this budget, into the stormwater budget.
That's very creative because, yeah, people would be on board. They see this massive asphalt
Yeah, I mean,
lot outside City Hall. But billing the city, it's sort of just transferring money back and forth.
no, you
I
were
don't
all
think it
for
helps us.
raising the parking rates, you could do that. You raise them
Oh, yeah,
to
with the parking
cover-
rates, yeah, but I mean, I think trying to bill like City
Well, it
Hall
is circular, but.
or the elementary school, the school district, which is already funded through our Sussex County property taxes, I don't know. It's gonna be a lot of paperwork to me that in the end, we could simplify it a bit.
And is AECom, can they, I guess, provide like comparison? If we created a utility and we charged a fee based on the amount of impervious or pervious surface one has, as opposed, and compared to raising the property tax with some, some formula, I guess, to fund
Oh, I'm
what
sure
we
we
need.
could.
Can they do like that comparison, just to, because part of public education is gonna be, what are my options here?
That's true.
And what is gonna maybe hurt the
What do we,
pocketbook a little bit less, or have a sense, because ultimately, we're gonna have to pay for it, we just, we have to decide how we're gonna pay for it,
that's right.
how we're gonna spend this money.
Are we ready to say that we want to use impervious surface? Or should we say we want to do a percentage of your utility bill? Should we say we want to do an assessment that goes onto your property tax? Are there other options? Dave had a bunch of options, and I'm sure Janice has gone through that whole exercise.
I don't think we have enough information to make a decision
Yeah.
today. And to say we want one or the other.
Yeah.
And when I look at one of the charts that we were given last time, it said that 38.8% of the properties are residential. I don't know what that number means.
38.8% of.
I
terms
don't
of
know
acreage.
how many units.
As a citizen.
How many units that translates to. Does that mean that there are 500, 1,000, 2,000 properties included in that 38.8%?
Didn't Dave say it was around 3,100 discrete properties?
I don't recall what he
think.
said, that's why I asked the question.
So, and that was
So,
like,
so in these different categories is how many individual properties would be billed if we set up a utility fee?
Mm-hmm.
Because that will determine how much money people pay.
We have
What-
2,400, we have about 2,400 water hookups, but Dave had those numbers.
I think he took parcels.
He had those numbers of parcels.
Yeah, I think he just did the number of parcels and which ones are residential, which ones
But could
are.
you get us that
Yeah,
information?
Sure.
it was that 75-25, like, divide, commercial, residential. And also, what about incentives to people if, they are faced with this new bill, if they were to change out their driveway to an
And that would certainly be
impervious surface
that would be a
or plant
needed
trees,
incentive
right?
program.
So
as
that
part
gets
of
very
it.
complicated too. I'm not saying, I just think we need to be,
Well-
honest about how complex this could get to
With
administer.
Property taxes, they assess the properties based on criteria, a set of criteria, and you are free to contest that, like I did. When they assessed my house as being worth a lot, and it was falling down, and so I
Next door
went and
neighbor, don't
contested
call.
and said, if you look at my house, it's not worth as much money as my neighbor's new house is. And they conceded that. So I think that you could do the same thing, that if you were being billed for the standard, rate or a particular rate for the amount of impervious stuff, and you put in an impervious driveway or took it out entirely, and just put a completely pervious surface in, then you could go to the city and say, here, lower my rate because So I think
And
that
that's,
same mechanism.
that's
would
clearly
work.
gonna be part of a program if one's
Right,
developed.
so
You
I
have
don't,
to
but
have
I
that
don't think you
mechanism.
have to
Because
like set up
our
some
vegetated
special.
data is 3 or 4 years dated already, so somebody comes in and go, hey, that's no
When
longer
you get
the
a permit
situation.
to put in your impervious, take out your concrete,
Yeah.
put in your,
Well, you do
impervious,
need a
so the city
permit,
would know,
yeah.
they give you a permit, it costs this, you know, for this area, then it
Then
reduce
you
your tax.
automatically get, yeah.
Well, no one's worried. This comes on the heels of people, of a lot of concern that building and licensing is already overworked and probably needs more staff because of some snafus that have transpired in recent weeks. So now we're going to burden them with having to go around and look at whether the seashell driveway is
Well, they're gonna do
is a
that
pervious
anyway when they all-
surface.
When you get a permit to put anything in, they,
Inspector.
yeah.
It's up to the
Okay.
property owner has to get their own survey and turn it in.
Well, they're gonna have to get a permit. I mean, if you're gonna change your driveway, then you're gonna have a permit to do
Yeah.
that. And then at that time, it's gonna be listed as impervious or pervious.
And these are all things, the magnitude of like the reduction in your stormwater utility has to be examined, I don't know, but
Well, I
it
think you're
it can be
getting ahead
done.
of it.
I know it can be done, I just hope, it seems everybody thinks this is the way to go. We should have this pretty complex system implemented for funding maybe at least half. Maybe the other half will be funded with parking, you know, through the general fund or parking, but you know, maybe I'm overly pessimistic, but to me, this is gonna be a complex assessment process, even though Dave has
So-
those
so what-
aerial
I would
data.
just ask them, what do you, what would be your preferred alternative? Just fund it
Oh,
out of
what
capital
I-
budget?
Well, no, what I had said back in April, bump up property taxes a little bit, maybe by 5%. You're looking to raise $1.5 to $2 million annually for the next 10 years. Is that a fair number? To me, that would cover storm, you know, what Dave has shown us. And that's not a huge sum of money, actually, in the grand scheme of things. So you bump up property taxes a little bit. 5% inflation is already at almost 12 to 14%, maybe even bump up property taxes by 10%, and then the other half comes from parking. But yeah, I could see it either way.
Say this, you're contradicting yourself. A minute ago, you were saying that, wait a second, that commercial properties aren't paying their fair share here, that they're creating this huge amount of runoff and that their property taxes are relatively low. If you're just talking about increasing the property taxes, you're increasing that disparity. What we're talking about is maybe more complex. What is trying to do is to apportion the burden of this on the offenders, and, you know. And
Well, no, I thought we needed some hard data on what
We do.
commercial properties pay in
We-
terms of property
we-
taxes.
if
So
we
that
bump-
if everybody's property taxes were to be raised by either 5 or 10%, just to make sure the base at which commercial property owners start isn't much lower than it should be, that's all, but
We
I
bump-
wasn't
if
gonna
we
worry
bump
about
up
their.
property taxes 5% for next year, bring a grand total of $100,000 into our budget.
Does that include commercial properties?
This is just the 2
The
million
budget, yeah.
that we get in property taxes. That's 1/6
Well, let's say,
of the money that
10%.
Kevin needs to
right.
O and
So it
M.
needs to be a lot higher.
Yeah.
It to be a lot
Not a
more
lot of money.
than 5%.
I'm not sure why it would be necessarily more complex to do a utility. And some of the other municipalities in the state that have done it seem like some of the things Dave talked about, they had pretty simple systems, it seemed to me, and not a lot of public opposition, from what I understand.
Right, Lewis, it's like $50 per residential property, it's a fixed amount, so they aren't even really looking at who has more impervious space, you know, versus who has more pervious space. They sort of just are trying to raise the money, you know,
They
sort
also
of, you know,
don't have-
back of the envelope way.
physically the same infrastructure, and they don't have giant hotels and as many parking lots. Lewis is largely residential. I mean, it's not
But I
the
think
same.
from what I've heard, that a lot of the advocates for utilities say it's actually more efficient way of doing it. So I don't know that it's this automatically going to be this more bureaucratic, complex system. And it's up to us. A lot of these issues that you're getting into are a little bit ahead of the game as far as how we're going to set it up. But
If we have 3,000 people and we charge each one of them $50 a year, that brings in a total of $150,000.
Oh, yeah, Lewis doesn't seem to, apparently they're not trying to fund $2 million a year,
That doesn't even touch our
clearly.
expenses.
Right. And it's not broadening the base.
Say again.
I kind of like the idea of broadening the base here, of being able to.
We're
tell
gonna
Delta,
have to
get a few
broaden the
dollars
base
out
to
of
the
it.
tourists. We're gonna have to do that. So that puts us,
I mean, this
in a
is
different-
not, this property tax, raising property taxes, is politically not a good idea, and if we're trying to raise money for needed projects, that's probably the worst way you could possibly do it. Not only is it not effective in the volume of money it brings in, but it's not equitable as far as the burden of rainwater, and it's not spreading it out amongst a larger base of revenues providers, so.
the fees we're gonna charge our homeowners is not going to, we're not even gonna touch the total amount. We're gonna help. I think I figured $510 a year, probably not. I was trying to do a quick.
Well, that makes sense because you said $50 is 1.5, so 500 would be,
Nothing.
150,000.
1.5
It would be
million.
1.5 million
Yeah.
if you did 500, because
Yeah.
10 times you're 50. Right. I guess I feel like we're sort of chasing our tails a little bit. We talked about the different mechanisms to do it. When we read that introductory piece before we convened the first meeting, it had some formulas that seemed somewhere easier to administer and others weren't. And one of those that was equitable in terms of the disproportionate share of impervious surface was one which creates a unit that is, if you're a resident, you're one unit, and if you're a commercial, you're multiple units, and that wouldn't seem that hard to do. You don't need to go out and look at, impervious surfaces in a homeowner's property. Didn't seem like it would have added that much bureaucracy. Janice, how much bureaucracy is involved, or Bruce, in the past ones you've experienced?
We, when we set up the utility, we hired one additional staff person, and then there will be other employees who will take part of it. But it's not a terrifically large bureaucracy. We did set up a utility credit program. Our consultant says that we have 8,300 residential properties plus a large number of commercial properties. He said of that number that only 5 to 10% of the people actually apply to receive a credit. It's not that you appeal what you're taxed. It's that if you want to participate in the credit program, it's an application program. It's a fairly simple application, and then you submit that, and then the staff reviews it. It has
Credits
a number
for
of
what,
things to do.
for landscaping or
Yeah, well,
changing?
it can be for, it's a number of things, Suzanne. It's things
Okay.
like pledging not to use fertilizers on your quarter acre of land. It's that if you install rain barrels, if you want to
Okay.
plant trees, if you want to participate in cleanup days. So
Oh,
there-
like litter pickup along the roads?
yes.
Okay,
or
this
we
is
have-
unbelievable
or
to
we
me.
have
I mean, this really worries me. A full-time staff person, doesn't surprise me that would be
Well,
needed to administer.
I'm not saying that would be here in Rehoboth Beach. I mean, we're 25,000 people, 6.2 square miles. This community is much smaller. But there were, it's like our Parks and Recreation Department plans a number of park cleanups during the year. And people sign up to do that. And you can get credit for doing that. So
Right.
there's a number of different ways. I will email the program so people can look at it. But it's not going to be a huge drain on our bureaucracy. So, and it would be.
No one else is, this is worried that the minute we start having, going to City Hall to say that this Saturday, like I actually did a litter cleanup along Route 1 between Dewey and the Indian River Inlet this spring, just Earth Day type thing. I don't know, the whole thing, and by the way, I mean, everyone seems concerned that if residential units are assessed and it's easy as pie, property taxes, as you all know, a larger house is paying more in property taxes on a 50 by 100 square foot lot than a smaller house. So there's some built-in proportion already in terms of runoff. But, you know, if you go the more complicated route, it does, to me, get very complicated.
Yeah, one of the other things, and it would be nice that if Dave, because he's familiar with utilities in different parts of the country, one of the things that we've already found out that by setting up a separate utility, that it becomes more, it's easier to apply for grants because you have all of your projects in one particular area. You have monies that are set aside, so that it's easier that when you apply for grants, that you have all your material together. We've already doubled the amount of grants that we received from the previous fiscal year, which is a good thing, because that's what I like to call free money.
Well, that might reflect just some of the pandemic money, but, you know, I
I
don't know.
can't answer why we got it, but we've established a utility and that works. I mean, that's something that anytime you get money that isn't from your local tax base,
Great,
that's good
always good,
that's good
yes.
for us. So, and I'm not saying that this community needs a utility, but we just need to look at all of the possibilities to make a decision whether this is the best way to do it.
Bruce, what can we do?
I was just going to suggest that I sent Kevin some links to some information about what Tacoma Park did originally and where it is now. And if he can share that, that might help to assuage some doubts about how it can be relatively simple to set up a utility.
Well, I do think we haven't we established that the majority here wants to do the utility? So I don't know that we need to spend the afternoon relitigating that. You know, I mean, what's next? We have, Kevin is going to provide more specific data and stuff. So why don't we move on here?
A utility would be billed, what, annually or quarterly, as then
Well,
people
it would
already
be quarterly.
Yeah.
What are we, do we have we made up our minds? Letitia, have you made up your mind about whether you'd like to go for a utility or not?
I mean, I'm not 100%, I'm leaning that way. I think I'm still interested in the comparison of what's raised with a fee, what's raised with incrementing property tax. I just want the benefit of that information, but I'm leaning towards utility.
Bob?
Utility.
Bruce?
I want some more data.
Mary?
I'd say I'm leaning toward utility.
Susan?
Leaning strongly to utility.
Elise?
Leaning to a utility, but I'd like
More
to
data.
see more data in
Yeah.
what Letitia has mentioned.
Suzanne?
I'm the outlier. I'm leaning against the
Against the utility.
designated utility because of the bureaucratic and implementation costs.
Frank?
Leaning heavily towards utility. I mean, I could be swayed when the numbers come in, but.
And I'm pretty sure Janice would go,
We-
if given the,
I think there are many good things about the utility, but I think there's details that we need to work on before we vote yes or no.
okay, that's what I'm trying to decide right now.
I guess the other thing is, and I think public outreach is on the agenda, but at what point do we begin to start to talk about this with the public? Because, you know, we're going to make a recommendation to the commissioners in November, and then the commissioners take months to decide. I mean, I don't know how that is going to work, but so it
Maybe years, Letitia.
okay, so it's not a shock to the rest of our compatriots here in Rehoboth Beach.
Yeah.
You know, how do we begin to like explain, you know, why is there a task force? Why, you know, what are we discussing? You know, because, so it's not a shock to people that, you know, we've recommended X because of this. I guess that's what so I'm just curious as to the public outreach aspect of what we're.
So some of the fear obviously is we don't want to get out in front of the
Sure, I
board of
understand that,
commissioners, right?
yeah.
So I would think at this point, as you're talking to your neighbors and other people in town, you're asking those questions and getting feedback to bring into this group. I don't think we could go as a city and put together this communication plan trying to sell a stormwater utility at this point, because that's what this group is trying to come up with. Once that recommendation goes forward, and if the board says, we want to, maybe that's when you go with the outreach. Say, here's the selling of it if it needs to be sold. But right now, I don't think we can get in front of the board on this.
So, I mean, this meeting's recorded, people can see it. Are we getting any feedback from these meetings at all?
Yeah, we get feedback. I get feedback.
You get feedback?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we're making headway.
but what kind of feedback are you getting?
Pretty good feedback.
Like what?
Like, you folks are working hard, you're doing a good job. But then we haven't, and then I make reports at the commissioners meeting, at the regular meeting. And I did a little presentation last time, and there were people in the audience who asked questions. And I'll do that again. Our Amy does a phenomenal job with minutes, and those get filed. And hopefully the commissioners are reading those minutes, and they're available to the public. People know what we're doing.
Okay.
They don't know whether we're doing what they would want to do. They don't know whether we're getting ready to give them a rain tax. They don't know what exactly what we're doing. Right now, I'm education is going to have to be critical. But right now, I'm working on having people know what stormwater is, having people know that we have stormwater needs. At the last presentation I gave, talked about how many $100,000 Kevin's requires just for O&M.
Okay.
But when you hit them with the rain tax, you're gonna get all kinds of pushback.
But at least, I mean, it's out
People are
there.
right. People
are reacting
communicate. They're
to the work of the
communicating.
task force, and, I mean, any concerns like that one guy that wrote to you at the beginning of when we started
Mr.
meeting
Paul
that.
Carano,
Yeah.
yes, he's the only person who's willing to be on the record. You know, he wrote us a letter.
Yeah.
I assume all of you've read it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he like me is worried about expanding the scope of government, but he's the only one who's written to us.
I wanted to share his letter with you, and remember, if you recall, I said, this person is not an outlier. There are a lot of people who are cautious about new taxes. They've
And
just,
that's why I asked the question, you know, are there any more Paul Caranos out there, or anybody who's like, yeah, I can understand getting a utility?
yeah.
Well, they're certainly welcome to come to these meetings.
Right.
It's certainly not too early to be more public about the challenges and the foreseeable expenses related to those. I mean, that's true whatever happens for this committee, you know, because I had no idea we had a stormwater utility issue, stormwater expense issue that was unfunded, essentially.
You know.
So it'd be nice for the public to be made aware of that. That's certainly agnostic to anything, but, you know, if you don't know that there's a problem and all you hear is it's gonna cost more to fix something you didn't know was an issue, then that's a tough,
Yeah.
Kevin, do you have video footage that you could maybe share at the upcoming mayor
Of
and
the
commissioners?
water quality in Silver Lake?
Oh, well, that might be part of it, but just of some of the
pick up a
crumbling
glass
pipes,
with
like that you could share at an
gunk like the
upcoming
one that
mayor and
somebody
commissioners
said.
meeting.
I think we
because,
have a lot
mean,
of pictures of flooded areas, during intense storms and those kind of things, which is, that.
'cause a lot of citizens only watch the, mayor and commissioners' regular meeting. So if it were presented in that sort of forum, maybe it would get people's attention a little better. But most people I know
Might get
don't have any
regulators'
idea.
attention.
think those
it might get regulators' attention.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I think with the
And we,
people I
we
know,
do, just one other quick one, I mean, we do that every year. I do that annual report, in the fall, and it's pretty comprehensive. Look at the last two.
Yeah, but Kevin, get a glass of water out of Lake Gerard and show it to people.
I think we could drink it.
Okay, well,
It might get sick, but
okay, well, then.
yeah.
I was just gonna say, the people I know, residents here, don't necessarily have like the knee-jerk no reaction. They just would like to understand what a stormwater utility is, and a lot of people don't really know what that's all about. So I think that's part of the education.
Maybe just a generic, hey, this has been going on, we've had 3 meetings now, and here's kind of where we are. That would be
Yeah.
nice. Throw that out there, social media somewhere.
Yeah, and that's why I shared what Arlington is doing with Jay, because they're at the early stages, but they're already thinking about how they're going to engage the community.
And I'm going
Even
to.
with a simple survey as to assessing what people understand. Do they know what a utility is? Is it this? You know, A, B, C, D. And then just, that general description of what is a utility. I think anything that we could put on our website or that Lynn could put in lines in the sand, she could start something
We'll get her to do that.
every other week with something. And I know I'm now getting the alerts about what's going on and how many water pipes have broken in the past month.
Too many.
Yeah, too many. That's a way, that's certainly a way of getting the idea out that something's not working. We've got infrastructure problems. But anything we can put on that website.
Is there a way to see the video from
County is
Arlington?
like a superbly run jurisdiction. I lived there.
Not my video. How long
no.
is it?
I'm
I'm your
sorry,
proxy.
Sue,
3
I didn't
minutes.
mean
3.
that.
3 minutes.
Arlington would be 2 minutes.
I'm going to take Mary's, no, excuse me, I'm going to take Elise's video, or her link. I'm going to take it to Lynn Cohn, and I'm going to say, can we do this? Let's do this.
Yeah, it's that little video right.
You may
yeah.
want to get permission
Yeah.
from Arlington County to use it.
Do I,
If Arlington produced it, you may want to get permission.
would we need,
Yeah, it's
would we
right
need to
there.
get
That's it.
permission to use their ID? We couldn't use that one.
They publish this.
The county has completed a stormwater utility feasibility study to explore a different option for funding the stormwater program. Currently, property owners pay a stormwater tax based on their property's real estate assessment. It's called a sanitary district tax. For an average homeowner, the current tax is about $130 per year. The county is considering changing to a stormwater utility fee, which is a fee based on the amount of impervious area on your property. Impervious area is a hard surface that doesn't allow water to soak into the ground, like a driveway, a roof, or a parking lot. Impervious area is a better measure of a property's use of the stormwater system than the property assessment. Because impervious area is a better measure of the use of the storm system, a stormwater utility is a fairer way to pay for the stormwater program. Properties that have more hard surfaces that generate more runoff would pay a higher fee under a stormwater utility. The stormwater utility would support the same stormwater program components as the sanitary district tax, such as maintenance of hundreds of miles of storm sewer pipe, thousands of storm drains and culverts and other infrastructure, funding to increase the storm system capacity and reduce flood risk, water quality and regulatory programs, green infrastructure, and stream resilience projects.
We're here at the Cardinal School Stormwater Vault. It's the first project to be constructed as part of the Flood Resilient Arlington initiative. When completed, this will be able to hold the equivalent of 6 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water. And it's an example of a stormwater management facility that the new Stormwater Utility Fund would help to finance.
As the county board considers next steps on the stormwater utility, we're looking for your feedback on possible rate structures for the utility fee and the credit program. There will be several opportunities to learn more about the stormwater utility and provide feedback. The county will share a feedback form in June to get your input, and there will be an open house on July 17th at the Lumber Run Community Center. Please go to the website to learn more.
Some white out and put.
She said use whiteout.
I heard it. That's clever.
Plagiarism
But
is
I'm
fine.
going to ask Lynn if we could produce a video, something like that. There are ways to improve on that. We could use a lot of photos that Kevin has, and I have photos. We could use a map of the of our stormwater pipes in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. There are a lot of things we could do to make a really great video. And,
Kevin, your presentation from last September, or you're planning to do another one like that in, like? I think they're gonna make it. In September? Because I don't wanna like add extra work. I think maybe September or late August, when you have it ready, might be soon enough to provide this to the public. I don't know what the
we're gonna have to
rush is.
get the timeline figured out. We're still working on lakes management plans, and there's other data around that we're gonna need before we go into our stormwater utility. But getting the funding straightened out is what we really need to do, and that's what we're working on.
Oh, yeah, I had a question. What is the status of our lakes management plan from the Army Corps of Engineers?
Kevin knows about that, and he'll probably, it's hard to whip those people, make them get it by next week.
Right, yeah. So we just recently got the extension granted from DENREC on the grant funding. So we had an issue with them because it was delayed for a whole host of great reasons and a couple that weren't so great. But we finally got a second draft, probably 4 to 6 weeks ago. Forwarded that out to the stakeholders, the county, Dewey, us, and DENREC. Provided a bunch of feedback and some additional material that they needed. I think the schedule calls for them to have us the final draft final, however you word it, November-ish. So this calendar year, we expect to see it.
One of the problems is Delaware owns the water and the lake bed, and we own the shore and all the outflows except maybe one that come into the lake. So it's kind of a shared, I'm not sure how much money it would take to dredge the lake, but we need to dredge Silver Lake and we need to dredge Lake Gerard. And that's gonna be really expensive.
Increase the size of the outfall. The outfall at Silver Lake is ancient and really at its capacity.
Is it like,
on
does
certain
it go
times.
toward Philadelphia? Where does it discharge?
empties
On
into the
Philadelphia
ocean.
Street?
Straight to the ocean.
Yeah, on which is Philadelphia Street, or like where?
No,
is it?
No,
the other end.
It's in Dewey Beach.
Oh, wow, okay.
It's
Yeah, there's one it's in
at the
Dewey
very
Beach or
south
close
end
to
of
it.
Silver Lake.
So, and that one has to be, Kevin would redone, reworked,
Right,
repaired.
and that's one of the
Maybe
things
outside of
that
our-
has come out during the whole investigation for the Lakes Management Plan is that there was some lack of ownership for certain parts of it. And those things will get ironed out and laid out specifically, who owns what and who's responsible for what in that plan.
Yeah.
Will it include any of the homeowners whose properties are right on the lake? Is there any thinking that they should be asked? I know that they will not allow.
There'll be recommendations in the
public to
report
use
on
their-
what to do with
Yeah.
respect to where their irrigation could be, whether they can fertilize, all those kind of things. The property issues are a delicate issue in Delaware.
Very delicate, because those homeowners won't even allow the public
some-
to bring like a dog to go swimming in
Some would
Silver
tell you
Lake.
they own all the way out into the lake, because my deed says, and all those
Yeah,
kind of things.
well,
So-
Save Our Lakes actually went to the Attorney General's office and got an opinion that, that was good work by them, because previously, the people around the lake said they could do whatever they wanted to the lake.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
There are 150 or 200 dogs that pee on my lakefront every day. So don't say we don't let dogs on our lakefront.
You're on the
It's
lakefront?
an issue.
Yeah, Frank and I we're next door neighbors.
Well, there are all sorts of,
Down the street.
basically no trespassing signs, at least on like
Well, this is
Silver
a
Lane.
tourist community. I don't know whether, if you had hundreds of people in your front yard, that you would be able to deal with it.
Yes.
Trust me,
We have
you
hundreds
live
of
in the
That's
beach
true.
block and on the lakefront.
This
It's a
was,
different
this was
world,
a
and you are-
quiet weekday morning, 8:30, early June. My son, who had come up from Roanoke with his dog and his girlfriend's dog, who, we were just walking toward Prospect Street toward, like, I guess Poodle Beach, to take the dogs on the beach. And a homeowner, his two dogs who went in the water, they're mixed breed labs and things who know how to swim. And within 3 or 4 minutes, the homeowner, who is easily 100 yards across from the edge of the lake, came out and pointed to the sign, which we hadn't yet gotten to, that mentions, no, something about this is a protected area, no.
Well, you must have been on the other side.
And he basically said, I don't want to be that guy. When people say that, they're going to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy, but, I'm worried the water quality isn't great. Your dogs could get sick. Do you think
That's true too.
that's how, so whatever. So my son called the dogs back out of the water and we proceeded on our walk. So I think it seems to be it's public land, but private homeowners have in effect appropriated it, at least. So I think we got to look into who bears the
Private
cost.
land. Plain and simple.
Having a dog off leash is against the law. Letting them run loose to swim in the lakes against the law.
Right, and having your dog on the beach in the city of Rehoboth Beach is against the law.
Well, we were headed south toward
Yeah, but
Dewey.
you're still in the city of Rehoboth Beach.
Where are we on the?
Prospect
Street?
Right now, we're
Sorry,
15
but
minutes.
anyway, so
Get it back to, yeah.
Not gonna win a whole lot of sympathy.
these dogs live in Roanoke, Virginia, so it was whatever. It took one swim.
Tell Dave we've used up his time.
Yeah, well,
We've gotten off the track. Susan just getting me back on the track.
can we get some sort of feedback
Let's-
on who, again, it goes back to the initial, we're gonna keep moving like we're gonna keep moving.
Yes.
until y'all tell us to stop. But do we
We just
any kind
decided,
of agreement on, we had agreement.
Go ahead.
On who would be participating in this fee structure? Are we gonna do the feds? Are we gonna try to send the feds a bill, or are they exempt? Are we gonna try to do Del Dot?
I recommend that we don't pursue avenues that are likely futile, because that's just a waste of time.
Yeah. Like the post office, Janice, do you know? I can't, that sounds like a waste of time
But
to
I
me.
think charities sound like that might be a fruitful area, given the comments earlier that you repeated that David thought it would withstand legal challenge. Is that?
How about everybody you send a utility bill to?
Doesn't,
Utility, right?
don't they pay utilities? There's no reason they wouldn't pay that bill if it's on it.
Joint utility, I mean, I own a
Yeah, if we say
condominium, I
yes,
don't get a water
Yeah.
bill,
we
it's
can exempt
included in
it
my
or not.
fee, so
Yeah.
you
No,
can't
they should
just
pay.
say everyone who gets a water bill.
Stamps are expensive.
Well, why don't we bill the condo and the condo fee
the
apportions
condo
it like they
do it
do
as a
everything
first.
else?
But generally, if that means, I don't know how many condos, but that's a number of property owners that you are, I mean, I own property individually and I own property collectively as part of my condo. So I would think more than just water bills. Everyone who pays it has a parcel that's taxed should be sent a bill.
But
Should
the
be
condo,
included.
your homeowners association just sent
That's
a
what
bill.
I'm saying.
Yeah,
Can you do the one bill, like the water bill for a condo complex, which the condo then somehow does an equitable apportionment, I presume, and it results in a monthly fee or something?
Right.
Actually, they wouldn't, it would be based on square footage. So, because some people have a larger unit than another, usually condominiums just count as one unit.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, they would, but if you send the bill to the condominium association, they will charge based on square footage, not on the number of units in the building.
But that's
kind
equitable,
of their
actually, because
business.
the two-bedroom should pay more in
But a
stormwater
stormwater
than the
utility-
one-bedroom.
But a stormwater utility is not a condominium's business, it's the city's business. So I would say everyone who pays a tax bill should be included, not just people who get water bills.
So condos are a hard,
It would be a
condos are a little more challenging.
It would be a larger pool of
Right.
participants.
Right.
Dave has condos worked out in his
Okay, I see
last
what you mean.
presentation to us.
I was thinking of.
I don't know what page it was, but if you go back and review that, you'll see his discussion on condos. And he had he had the fees worked out per
Okay, I
condo.
understand that.
So,
That's what Janice is saying.
Based on
so that's
property
what,
taxes.
that's probably what works.
Okay.
Based on property taxes, then.
No,
They're probably
based on
listed.
impervious surface.
Okay, that's amazing. Okay, within like a
Condos are structured
100-unit
differently.
building.
Because
I don't know how
Ours
they,
ours is different.
huh?
Ours
Can
is different.
Bruce, can you say that louder so we can hear?
I don't know.
Condos are structured differently depending on which condo you're talking about.
Right, because I think yours are all individually metered.
Individually,
water, if you're
40
talking water.
individually metered, but my assumption is the impervious surface utility fee would go to the association, and either the association pays it or apportions it.
That's what I was thinking, because you have to think about
But I
a
don't
garage
know
or a
that.
parking lot or a swimming pool or.
And that's the way Dave calculated it, per condominium based on impervious surface.
How about the city?
Huh?
You want to send the city?
He
a
has
bill?
that, he did the city, he did
what-
the city,
what's
we
the
did,
feeling?
I can't remember what we did. It's this little old piddlings number. Well,
We own
anyway,
a lot of the
I don't
streets.
want to belabor that.
We own a lot of the streets, and we own City Hall and a big parking lot, so
Yeah, and,
that's the city's cost. One avenue would be,
He did-
that's the
he
kitty,
did-
that's the city's cost share, right?
our,
So that's just moving money around. It's
Correct.
not going to raise any revenue for us.
It's going to move it
Right.
from general fund to the utility.
Good. Mhm. Which is what, there's
Yeah,
been an
at least
argument
it goes
made.
in- right, it
It
goes
should
into
be
the
happening,
our,
right?
our decision is, do we want to make this revenue neutral, or do we want to bring new revenue into the city's budget?
Now, I think we're not there yet, because you don't know what that big number is, if it's, per person. We're gonna get there. Right now, I need to know who to include as eligible to pay something.
If we decide to be revenue neutral, we're talking about an entirely different scheme of things with our utility. Although that may be how we want to calculate it. But I think we should calculate it from the beginning as bringing new revenue into the system.
Are we gonna build the city? I guess,
We'll
keep
build-
going
we'll
back to
build-
my original
we'll
question.
build the city.
Should the city have to pay as
We'll
well?
build the city for their
impervious
40%
area,
or whatever the-
But
whatever
that,
the rate is.
that's not raising new revenue,
That
which
isn't,
we've
yeah.
already established we need new revenue.
1.5
It's just
to 2
moving
million
it
a
out
year.
of, it's adding another expense item to the operating budget, which is gonna consume revenues. And so,
We
definitely
want
moving money.
we want to bring revenue into the city budget that's not there now.
so that's not billing the city, for instance.
By billing the city for their share of 40% of the funding, means the city has to contribute 40%. And then the state or whoever it is, for roads, for that particular portion. And that leaves the other 60% for us to calculate how we want to work it. Do we want to divide that up in 1,800 different parcels? Do we want to do impervious surface? Do we want to do some other assessment?
Actually,
What do we
billing the
wanna do?
city, that actually is ingenious. That asks the city, through the general fund or however, to fund about 40, I'd vote for closer to 50% of this, and that would come through either parking or whatever way. And then, and the other 50% would be a new stormwater utility which everyone seems to want.
Are we likely to
property
get
owners.
the bill paid if we bill for roads?
A great question, and Dave had that answer, because he was gonna check what Newark did.
Okay.
Because they went after the state for theirs. I don't know if he was successful or not.
Okay.
So one of the
yeah.
big,
'Cause that would
the
be a
big
big-
Correct.
questions.
Although
we're
it's
gonna
not that
have-
much of state roads here,
Right.
in all
But
honesty.
one of the
Most
big
it's
questions
ours.
we have for the next meeting, though, is we have to do our homework and figure out, in the state of Delaware, in our municipality, who is billable? As far as people who are tax exempt, or,
I think
is
the glory of
state
the fee-
billable,
I think
or
we can
churches
as a
billable,
fee.
or,
We can't levy a tax, but we can impose a
but
fee.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as this fee goes, who is,
That,
we
we
could
have
figure
a lot
out,
of latitude, I think, with that you don't have with a tax.
but we don't know for sure right now. But we
Correct.
can find out before the next meeting
Correct.
and use that information to help make a decision about.
Kevin, is it possible, if you're coming up with the square footage or whatever it is for the city, is it possible to break that into streets and other, like City Hall, parking lots.
I would think
Dave had that on the aerial, on his data set that I guess was
So
done
it's-
through a
it's-
grant.
it's
He
good to
has pretty good
understand
data for
what
that.
the impact of that split is.
Streets were like 40%, weren't they, of the impervious
on that
cover,
breakdown,
I think, about 40% of
If
the towns.
If right-of-way is included. We were given two charts last time. One was impervious area-based assessment, parcels only, and the second one was impervious area-based assessment, including rights-of-way. So if we look at these two charts and then ask for information based on these two charts, we'll get the information we need, right?
I think so.
And the next to the last item on Dave's agenda was restructure existing revenues. Probably not, in my opinion. I think we should bring in new revenue.
But
And-
am
go
I
ahead,
missing
Susan.
something? Am I missing something? If you build a city, isn't that restructuring existing revenues? Because we're not adding new revenues. The city's gonna have an expense
Yeah.
that they're gonna have to fund through whatever the operating budget, whatever money flows through that already. There's not new money. And yes, it's coming over to this separate entity, but it's coming out of the city's budget.
And we're putting it in with extra fees for stormwater. Am I missing?
I don't know,
Well,
I
it's-
might be missing something. What am I not
No, no,
understanding?
it's really, you're addressing what I think a lot of people are
Right.
saying, this is just circular, it's a
Circular.
left pocket, right pocket, you know?
Right.
But it's essentially taking general fund money in the percentage that the city gets it, parking, you know, property taxes and whatever, transfer fees, and applying it in that percentage to this particular issue. It's kind of an earmark is
It is
essentially
an
what it
earmark, but we're using more money than we used yesterday.
But if you're using more money, then you're gonna raise taxes somewhere to do
Somewhere.
that.
Raise
Raise-
earmark fees.
Right. If you're pulling it out of general revenue, it's raising somebody's fees or taxes, as opposed to this utility, which would have its own fee and structure and target base.
Here's the way I think of it. 60% of this utility money is new money coming from homeowners, commercial people, and churches maybe, and other,
Benrec.
it's new money, and,
Del
yeah. And the other 40% comes from the city's general budget, or whatever they want to use to pay their 40% share. Now, I don't think we can get 60% from the homeowners, the commercial people, and the nonprofits to make it go. I think we're gonna have to take more than 60 from the,
General.
we're gonna make it up from the general budget. As
Why not
I was saying a minute
50/50?
ago.
Like, why do we want to make it 60/40
We
rather
don't
than
have any data,
50/50?
so I don't
Right.
know, you know,
Yeah.
that's what
This is-
helps shape this conversation.
Absolutely.
Just go back and look at Bruce's presentation from last time,
Dave,
and take a look at his charts.
Now, the 60/40 is based on the city's impervious surface, right?
Based on roads and streets.
That's
That's
not
something-
based on the city structures.
The
and-
city has a little bit more, and it's in Bruce's presentation.
David's.
David Atkins.
David's presentation.
Like City
Janet-
Hall,
Janice probably has
Chamber
it.
of Commerce, which is city property, like, but I don't know. I just
But it
thought
was a
50,
small
50,
amount, like
50.
1.9%.
Only
There's-
because
something like
50/50
that. Yeah,
seems
1 point-
cleaner. We share it, you know, half from transient people, you know, visitors, whatever it is, and the other 50% on property owners. It just seemed cleaner, 50/50, but, you know, it doesn't, a 60/40 split isn't
Yeah,
that big a difference.
I don't think we're gonna wanna do that. I think we're gonna do a 20% maybe, or 18, 15% from, I just don't know how we're gonna do it. But we're not gonna be able to put all that money on the residents, the churches, and the nonprofits, I think we're gonna need more out of the general fund.
Well, are you willing, or do you want me to try to ask the city for commercial? I really think it would be helpful to have some idea of some of the more major commercial properties here. You know, what percentage of property taxes they're paying. 'Cause I do believe the stormwater utility fee will be proportionate in some way to property taxes. I mean, you have a big 7-bedroom house is paying more in property taxes and will pay more in stormwater impact fee than a 2-bedroom cottage with, from the 1920s.
I think Dave's calculated that into the equation. I mean, I think it's right there in front of us from the last meeting.
Hey, Jay, since it's 3 o'clock, what, next time, we are going to continue this conversation about, I think what says revenues, sources. So hopefully Dave is better, or, but are we going to, I guess, what can we expect next time?
Don't you think, Kevin, that he'll probably recap what we did today a little bit and then go on with the regular August?
Yeah, I
plan.
don't know, we want to rehash that. I'm like dizzy from the way it went around today. I don't know where we'll go with the adjusted schedule based on his availability. So maybe if he's back to work and feeling good here shortly, then we'll probably try to get back on something similar to this timeline. But we're really, we're missing, June and not getting near as much done today as we probably wanted to. We're probably 60 days behind, but we'll, try to figure out the best way to get forward. But we've got to start, I think, really getting focused in on answers so that he can move this forward to get what the numbers are going to be.
Yeah,
And I know it's circular, and I think Frank said, sometimes you got to take some assumptions and then compare certain things to then say, well, we want to go down that path. Because there's just a lot of variables at this point. But things like who we want to have to participate, what's fair, and it's commercials and residentials and all those kind of things. We're going to have to start driving those.
The first Tuesday in
preliminary decisions. We can always go back and revisit.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, but at least give us some more definition on how to
Set
move
up a
forward.
model and then plug
Yeah.
numbers into it.
Right, exactly.
The first Tuesday in August is
Hopefully it's
the 2nd of August. And let's do 1 p.m. Second of August. Are we good to go? Do we have last minute things that we need to bring up? Before we leave, I want everybody to take a copy of the 5101 over there, a hard copy. And I think we've talked about the future topics. It's on the bottom of our agenda. And I'll send a copy of that small spreadsheet out to everybody again, and so we can have that. And
Did we post that last time, Commissioner?
I don't know that it's I think it's posted as part of
Right.
of Dave's presentation, and you really couldn't see it all that well.
But I think if you email it out, I think we have to put it on the portal.
Well, by all means.
Yeah, okay.
By all means, but that may be twice that it's on there. We'll have to look and see. But I separated it out from the PDF.
Could we get a tutorial on the amount of dredging that's done annually in Silver Lake and Lake Gerard and
The only dredging
We
that's
don't do
been
any.
done was
Zero.
4 or 5 years ago,
it hasn't been done in 4 or 5 years?
whenever Denrec did that project.
Okay.
in Silver Lake.
Or just a little update on whether some of the, that will be an affiliated cost for some of the stormwater upgrades.
Let's adjourn the meeting at 3:02, and anybody that wants to hang around and ask questions and give me suggestions.